This week on The Record, Decision 2024 already underway as early voting begins. What's on your ballot? The lesser-known fight to hire a government lawyer in St. Louis County. Why that might matter to you. Election integrity on the ballot. Which candidate would scrap voting machines for a hand count? The race for Missouri Secretary of State. Both candidates are on the record. It's all coming up right now. Welcome to The Record. I'm Mark Maxwell. Tens of millions of Americans have already taken part in Decision 2024. Election officials across the country are printing blank ballots and collecting completed ones. With 9 days to go before polls close, we turn to the race for Missouri Secretary of State, an open seat to decide who will become the state's next top election officer. State Senator Denny Hoskins and the Republican nominee for Secretary of State joins us now on The Record. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, before we jump into this race facing you, I want to look back. This is our first time talking since you won a rather crowded primary. There were 8 Republicans running for this job. How do you assess the path to victory that you climbed in that race?
Most certainly, I think that I just outworked everybody. You know, my wife and I, between January and July of this year, we went to about 150 events across this great state. And I've said there's no city too big or town too small that we didn't visit and talk about my plan for election integrity in the Secretary of State's race.
I have a sample ballot from St. Louis City in front of me here, 5 pages in all. That's printed on just one side of the page here. Amendment 7 is one here that asks about ranked choice voting.
That's right.
But it also puts in this question about citizenship and voting. Let's set that aside for a moment and focus on ranked choice voting. In the current incentive structure to elect someone, you have to do what you just did. Be the most Republican in the field of Republicans. Is that a healthy incentive structure to represent everybody in a district or a state?
Most certainly, I think so. You know, when we talk about being the most conservative Republican, I believe that I was the most conservative Republican, but I also believe that I outworked everyone. I went to so many more events than anyone else. I was outraised. I had about $300,000 to spend on a statewide race, which is $300,000 is a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money for a statewide race.
That's all successful in clearing the first hurdle.
That's right.
But my question is, how do you evolve into serving everyone in the state, Democrat, Independent, Libertarian, Republican alike? Because you made a lot of promises in a Republican primary. But now the job becomes serving everyone in the state, regardless of party affiliation. Can you do both?
I most certainly can do both. I believe that our elections should be safe and secure, and we need people that have confidence in our elections. You know, people have asked, why the Secretary of State? Why run for Secretary of State? Why is that important? And it all boils down to elections and having confidence in our elections. If we don't believe that our elections are safe and secure, then it doesn't matter who they say won. President, governor, Secretary of State, city council, school board, chaos will ensue. So I want to make sure that our elections are safe and secure.
And just doing the rough math here, you've been elected how many times?
I was elected 4 times as a state representative and twice as a state senator. So
I'm no accountant. That's 6 times.
Yes, 6 times.
Hope it going for 7.
Yes.
Did you trust those elections?
I did trust those elections. In fact, back in 2008, my first election, out of 14,000 votes cast, I won by 122 votes. And so we actually had a recount in my election. We went back and looked at those ballots individually.
And in every time, I just came back from the St. Louis County Election Board where early voting is already underway, and the election officials there, they use voting machines to tabulate, count the ballots. You don't trust those?
You know, I do have some concerns about the election machines, mainly, you know, most recently in June of 2024 in Puerto Rico, which is a territory of the United States, they had Dominion voting machines. And after the election, they weren't able to reconcile the difference between the election machines and the paper ballots. So I do have some concerns about the election machines. And most
in Puerto Rico?
Well, I mean, it's the same machine. Dominion voting machines are being used all over the United States as well.
And you understand the liability that broadcast outlets like Fox News took on when they ran wild with claims about what Dominion voting machines had to do with the outcome in 2020. You're not making those claims.
No, I'm not making those claims. But, you know, like I said, most recently, you can just Google Puerto Rico 2024 primary Dominion voting machines, and you see that, hey, they weren't able to reconcile those differences.
Brings me to the point that the election commissioners in St. Louis County, the largest local election authority in the entire state, made to us just this week, which was, in every instance, when they had to open up the voting machines, take out the paper ballots, and recount by hand the counts in close races that they already counted by machine, in every instance, they were not able to discern any distinguishable difference between the hand count and the machine count. Does that give you greater confidence that the machines worked properly?
Well, that does give me greater confidence. But, we need to look at the election machines and make sure that they are accurately counting those. And when I've traveled across this great state, there's been a lot of voters here in the state of Missouri that have concerns about the election machines. And so we can look at, maybe at the same time while we're going through the election machines and having those count the votes, also hand count those at the same time. I mean, we hand counted ballots for...
At the same time?
Yes, we've hand counted ballots for years and years and years.
Do you know why they went away from hand count to machines?
Well, they thought that it would be more accurate with machines.
There was a lot of fraud with hand counting. There was a
Yes.
lot of manipulation. Election judges who could sneak in a little smudge on a ballot here and
Right.
spoil it, or they
Right.
could do. You're introducing a lot more risk, aren't you?
I don't believe so. There's risk no matter if you're hand counting ballots or if you have election machines. I mean, there's other countries that hand count ballots and turn around those same results or those results within one day.
The United Kingdom does that.
Yes, United Kingdom does that. Here in the state of Missouri, I mean, even in Johnson County, in Warrensburg, where I'm from, they had a special election in August of 2023. They had paper ballots. They hand counted those ballots. Osage County, in the municipal election in April of 2023, did paper ballots and hand counted those ballots. So I believe that it can be done.
Here we are.
We did it for hundreds of years.
This time is the
Yes.
last question.
All right.
Why is this race between you and Barbara Feifer, the Democrat running for Secretary of State, what's at stake for voters as they walk into the ballot box?
Well, most certainly. In 2022, I fought to make sure we passed the bill that said you had to have photo ID. My opponent does not believe in a photo ID for voting. She thinks that that's racist. Also, some of the
Because
funding...
people of color often don't have as much access. There's a lower percentage of people that have a voter ID to fill out the context there.
Well, I mean, you have to have a photo ID almost for anywhere. If you go to a bank, if you have order new cable service and they come to your home, they want to see a photo ID. So we provided the opportunity for anybody to get a photo ID free of charge, one photo ID. And then also, unfortunately, some of the funding for our public libraries actually comes through the Secretary of State's office. And unfortunately, in some of our public libraries, there's X-rated material in the kids section. I believe that we should withhold those funds for any of those public libraries that have X-rated material in the kids section. It's not appropriate for kids. You wouldn't take your 10-year-old daughter to a rated R movie, where my opponent voted, or she believes that that's fine.
Senator Hoskins, thank you for your time.
Yep, thank you.
Welcome back, House Representative and the Democratic nominee for Missouri Secretary of State, Barbara Feifer, is now on the record. She joins us in studio. It's good to have you with us.
Well, thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
I want to ask you to respond to comments that your opponent, Denny Hoskins, the Republican, has made. He says you want to put pornography in libraries for kids. You're also a Methodist pastor. Those two things don't seem to go hand in hand with me. Do you want to clarify your position?
I read that online this week, and I was torn between being totally flabbergasted and just laughing out loud. It's the most absurd thing I've ever heard in my life. I have no idea why he would think that. All I believe is that parents are the ones that should decide what their children should read, and that local libraries, with their library boards, decide what should be in the library. They're the ones that are paying the money for their libraries, and they're the ones that decide.
The Secretary of State does have some funding that goes to local libraries.
Yes.
Is that a lever you would use to alter their behavior
No,
in any way?
I don't believe so, no.
What if libraries were banning books outright, books you believe should be available to everyone?
I don't think that it's my function to do that.
Let the locals decide.
Absolutely. 97% of the money for local libraries comes from localities.
The commonly used line around elections and election integrity is that as a society, we'd like to make it easy to vote and harder to cheat.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Let's separate those out for a moment. Is there anything you can do in Missouri to make it easier to vote?
In terms of the way the law is currently written, I don't think so. But we do have early voting now. And
The
in
law
fact,
requires a photo ID. Some people don't have one.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes, and in fact, hold on to that thought, because I'll get back to it. So in terms of early voting, I think it's a great idea, but of course we follow the law. In terms of absentee ballots, I think it's a great idea, but we follow the law. In terms of using voting machines, I think it's a really important thing, but we follow the law. That's what the Secretary of State does. Now, when you talk about voter ID, we have some real problems in areas of Missouri with people having access to voter IDs, especially rural areas.
Even though the state says it will pay the costs for those voter IDs?
Yeah, but the reason is not the cost. The reason is getting access to them. Because we have areas where it's very hard to get a driver's license or to get a non-driver's license ID.
Why is that?
Because the DMVs are closing shop and leaving the rural areas. They can't make enough money with the current fee structure. And so we've had DMVs closing across the state. We've even had that here in the city of St. Louis. So one of the things that I've been researching is the idea of mobile units. And in Michigan, for example, that's what they do in rural areas.
So taking a driver's license printer to them?
Well, and not just the
In essence?
printer, also all the computers.
The administration gear.
Yes, exactly. And Michigan has been doing this for a couple of years, and in fact, they're expanding the program. And I would really love to see us doing that.
This has been an interesting conversation in how we could make it easier to vote. Let's shift now to what we could do to make it harder to cheat. Anything you would do there?
We don't have a problem with cheating in Missouri. So I think sometimes we have solutions in search of a problem. And certainly if we have evidence of cheating, we need to find out what that is and work on it. Again, that's something for the legislature to do.
Part of it is in administrating voter rolls, like who's a current voter,
Right.
who's moved in or out of state, who's died.
Right.
And the current Secretary of State scrapped ERIC, the Electronic Registration Information Center. There are other alternatives to it, and there's ERIC itself. Would you bring ERIC back, something else, something similar? Does the state need to have a way to speak to other states to know when a voter...
I think it's a good idea. I really do. And ERIC is bipartisan. I have never really understood the argument to scrap it. I'm certainly open to looking at other systems. I think whichever is going to be most effective for Missouri. We have to remember that it's local counties that really are doing the voter rolls. And so the Secretary of State needs to give whatever help they need. But certainly this issue of people moving across state lines, it happens all the time. And it just doesn't make sense to me that we're kind of putting one hand behind our back by not participating in ERIC.
Maybe you've seen, but a lot of the attention, a lot of the money in Missouri this year has gone, look, yes, there's the presidential race, but there are these big amendment questions. That's driving a lot of money.
Yes, it
There's the
is.
governor's race. There's a lot of money going there. There hasn't been as much money going to the down ballot statewide races like yours,
Right.
but even in that, you're recently outraising your Republican opponent. How do you describe that shift? Why are donors looking your direction more frequently than they are Denny Hoskins these days?
Well, all I know is what I discern from people who are talking to me. So this is not scientific. But it seems to me almost everybody I've ever met wants a system that is fair. And I don't have an agenda in terms of I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. My agenda is three things. First of all, to be professional. Secondly, to be honest. And thirdly, to be transparent. I really look at the Office of the Secretary of State as being the engine of democracy in Missouri. And I think we all need an umpire that is going to call the balls and call the strikes fairly.
She's House Democrat Barbara Feifer, running for Missouri Secretary of State. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
We're back in a moment. If you vote in St. Louis County, you're going to see three big questions on your ballot, adding to that long list and perhaps to your wait time. Let's dig into what some of those questions mean and how they might impact your life. Joining us now is North County Councilwoman Rita Hurd Days. It's good to have you with us.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here, Mike.
The county executive's power is on the ballot this year. It looks like there's a number of things the county council, you and your colleagues, want to see changed. One of them is you want your own lawyer, separate and apart from the lawyer that advises Sam Page. Why?
Well, I think that that goes to the independence of our governments. We know that there are three forms of government, and we are one, and they are equal. And so I liken that to the fact that if Speaker Johnson would not utilize the lawyers that President Biden would use, and I look at what we're trying to do as the same thing.
I guess
We
you're
need
Speaker Johnson in
independence.
this analogy.
Speaker Johnson. But in this analogy, I think that that's appropriate, and we need some independence when it comes to our attorneys and the opinions that we get from them.
Is that how wide the disagreements are between the county council and the executive?
It can be, yes, it can be, which probably goes into another one of the propositions that's on the ballot in terms of the start date. When we came on, there's a discrepancy in the starting date and holding council members over to vote for leadership. So we know that in any other form of government, those who have been elected will be the ones who will decide on leadership.
You don't
And
want a
we-
lame duck making a decisive
That is correct,
choice.
and we did have that at one point, yes.
Now, do you find it difficult in a campaign to persuade voters why they should care about a start date or one more lawyer in the bureaucracy?
Really, that's why we're doing this, because they don't. They really don't know the intricacies of how this particular government works. And I think it's up to us to explain those kinds of things to them and why they are important.
Do you feel the county council, do you feel your role has been hobbled in some way by the current structure?
In many ways, yes, because we depend on the county executives, people to tell us and to govern us in terms of our legal opportunities there. And at some points, there have been contentious debates on that and their authority versus ours.
If I'm a voter in the city, in the county, and full disclosure, I vote in the city, I live in the city of St. Louis, but if I was a voter in the county, what's in it for me? Why would I vote on this thing? It seems like it changes your job, but why does it change me at all?
Well, it's good governance, number one. It creates an independence, number two, and it allows us to do what we need to do for our constituents. So our constituents don't need to be hobbled by decisions that will be made, perhaps for political reasons. And so I think that independence is very, very needed.
Have you seen that in the executive?
Yes.
Political
Yes.
decision making?
Yes.
What's an example of that?
Well, the example was when I came on board. The second year I wanted to be the chair. I ran for the chair, and the county executive held over a member to vote against me to keep me from being the chair. We had to go to court. We had to spend taxpayers' money. That's why they ought to be concerned about this.
And then there was a conflict because you had the same lawyer representing both sides.
That is correct. We had to go outside to get a lawyer, though. We had to go outside so that we can have an independent decision on that.
We talked about two of these propositions. There's Proposition A, C, and O. One would grant each of you members on the county council a chance to appoint someone to the Port Authority. Right now, the executive makes those appointments. Who cares?
That is correct. That is correct, because I may have something in my district that I need the
Yeah.
Port Authority to fund, and if I don't have any representation on that board, that may not happen. So I think we have 7 members. Each one of us will have an opportunity to appoint someone, and then we each have an opportunity to access that money.
This election coming up has the St. Louis County prosecutor on the ballot, very likely to win a seat in Congress. What concerns do you have about the transition in that office?
Well, the county executive will make a recommendation to the county council, and it will be up to us to look at the resumes of all those who are interested and pick the best person that we think will carry on that duty.
And what are the attributes you find most important in that job?
I think being open and honest about how the department works, how the prosecuting attorney works, what kinds of things that they need to be doing in the community. It's a law enforcement arm, if you will, and I think that our citizens need to be comfortable with the kind of person that we will put in that position.
Are there things you think that a new prosecutor could build upon or improve upon from the work that Wesley Bell had done?
Well, I think the diversion program is one of those that he started, and I think that's important. We have certainly we have the drug courts, and that is important. And I've attended just about all of their graduations. It's really important, and I would hope that person would continue on with those activities.
Councilwoman Ritter Hurd Days, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Mike. Appreciate the opportunity.
All right, thanks. We're back in a moment. A lot more interesting moments in these expanded interviews up on KSDK.com. Plus, tune into 5 Plus tomorrow at 1:15 for an expanded version of this episode. Well, they say politics ain't beanbag, and a Kansas City TV reporter learned that the hard way on the campaign trail this week when shrapnel or perhaps a fragment from a high-powered rifle struck him in the arm. Quite the occupational hazard, maybe a workers' comp claim in progress. But not to worry, a Marine was close by and jumped into action. Democrat Lucas Kuntz applying first aid alongside former Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger. The only kicker, Kuntz was the one who pulled the trigger. He was also stopping to shoot at a pop-up shooting range there, and video there showed him personally involved in setting up those targets at very close range, especially for a rifle with a scope. Now look, it's not uncommon to find a marksman practicing with a rifle like that from maybe 100 yards or a highly skilled sniper from 300 to 500 yards. They were shooting from less than 15 yards away. Senator Josh Hawley pounced at the October surprise and said Lucas Coons wanted a fake photo op so bad he almost killed a guy for it. The reporter's okay. He was seen smiling and laughing and even stayed on the job to finish filing the report. But it makes you wonder what Teddy Roosevelt might have thought of the whole episode, so let's check the record. Roosevelt said a vote is like a rifle. Its usefulness depends on the character of the user. That's all of our time this week. We'll be back here right next week and find out if those pollsters are more accurate than Mr. Coons. Until then, we're off the record.